Welkom bij Big Talk. Rotterdam is 10 dagen lang helemaal filmgek en iedere avond is er hier in het oude Luxor een talkshow. Daarin zetten we top-interviewers tegenover de belangrijkste gasten van het filmfestival. Vanavond spreekt oud-directeur Emile Fallaux met Gianfranco Rosi over zijn film El Sicario, Room 164.
Función de un sicario es acabar con una persona de forma inmediata, ya sea por medio de un balazo, cuchillada o un golpe tan certero que nada va a sentir más que eso. La forma en un carro. Cuando un sicario es un profesional, no hace lo que hace cualquier imitador a sicario. Este es un carro. El objetivo va manejando y hay que matarlo. Un imitador hace esto. Escupe todo el carro. Cuando un sicario trabaja y tiene un objetivo y va manejando, y este es el objetivo, son dos formas muy sencillas. Hace un círculo aquí, donde es la chapa del carro, o hace un círculo en el vidrio, donde es la cabeza del objetivo. Ese es un sicario. Los demás son imitadores.
Good evening. You're about to see a film in which a hitman describes his work, his world, a guy who survives undercover and doesn't know where to go. I think he now doesn't serve the cartel bosses anymore. He serves another authority, God. But we'll get to that later. How did this guy decide to talk to you? Yeah. Yeah, right.
Well, before talking to me, he decided to talk to the writer and journalist and reporter Charles Bowden, who happens to be a great friend of mine since a few years. And he spent like over the last probably 15, 20 years in the border. He lives in Arizona, in Tucson, Arizona. And he basically spent the last, I think, maybe 30 years of his life covering stories about cartel, about drugs, about crimes between Mexico and the United States of America, and tried to figure it out. He wrote incredible books about that area in Juarez, in the border. And he arrived at the moment of his life when he said, "That's it, I'm done with this. I don't want to cover anymore this part of the world. I'm as a closure of my career, I want to write about a Sicario. I want to show who is in the back of these 30,000 people died in the last 2 years in Mexico." And I think when we did the film, there's no sound. When we did the film, the dead people, there were 4,000, and now there are 9,000 just.
So an incredible increase of the number of
killings. When I was there I spent there two months in Juarez shooting. After I did the interview, I wanted to understand what he was talking about, and I spent 2 months there shooting. At the beginning, I was thinking to include images of that in the film, but then I decided on the editing, and we can talk about that.
Yeah.
But this just to arrive, how do we do this? So when I read this article on Harper's Magazine, I was completely shocked by the article, and I asked Chuck, why did you write this? About this incredible? And he said, well, I want to show that, 30,000 people dying is not a fact of magic realism, but there is a people in the back.
Yeah.
And I met a person that is on the top of the pyramid of this, and I was able, through contact and through trust that he built throughout this year, to arrive to the...
He gave access to...
And then when I read the article and I asked him, I would like to make a movie about that. At the beginning I was thinking more about a feature film than a documentary.
Oh, yeah?
But still I wanted to meet him. And he didn't agree to be filmed at the beginning. And then, after a lot of back and forth, he kind of wrote an email saying that he wanted to be paid money. I said, well, I don't like to pay money for a character in a documentary. And then he wrote something very funny in a way, and dramatic. He said, well, I used to charge $4,000 to shoot people, and I'm going to ask the same amount of money for you to shoot me. And I accepted this kind of, that was somehow a condition that could have been accepted. And when I met him, it was not easy to first of all, he wanted to meet me first and decide if I was going to be the right person.
Yeah.
He was trusting me enough. And so we met, and I guess he decided that I could be the person filming. And he picked up the location. At the beginning, I didn't understand why, and then while I was shooting, I understood why, because that was a place where he used to run business there.
I have that story that inspired you. Let me read something that gives you an idea. The writer, Charles Bowden, I was in a distant city, and a man told me of the killer and how he had hidden him. He said at first he feared him, but he was so useful. He could help clean everything and cook all the time and get on his hands and knees and polish his shoes. I took him on as a favor, this man explained. And I said, the writer said, I want him. I want to put him on paper. And so I came. We meet in a parking lot, our cars conjoined, like cops with driver next to driver. I hand over some photographs. He quickly glances at them and then tells me to go to a pizza parlor. There he says, we must find a quiet place because he talks very loudly. I rent a motel room with him. None of this can be arranged ahead of time because that would allow me to set him up. He glances at the photographs, images never printed in newspapers. He stabs his finger at a guy standing over a half-exposed body in a grave and says, this picture can get you killed. Now my question is, if the writer could have been killed over a photograph, you made a full moving picture. Why are you here, alive? How come?
Well, I don't think about that, I think the first on the road, Chucky always say, they're going to first get me and then they're going to come to you. So till he's alive, I'm fine.
As long as the writer is alive, you're safe.
I don't worry about.
Okay.
The moment they're going to get him, then I start thinking
So you
about.
keep track of the writer all the time?
We talk every day.
Okay.
Every morning is an email that he says, I'm alive. Don't worry.
Keep going.
Keep going.
So you're working on your next project now?
I'm working on the next project in Rome. For my first Italian film. I'm Italian, but I always did film.
Okay, we'll get to that later, because we're here for El Sicario, room 164. Now, I understand Bowden's fascination with the subject, because after all, as you said, he has been working on it for about 20 years as a crime reporter, working on the narco traffickers and killers in Mexico. And he writes that he has been waiting all his life to get to a killer that talks.
And to see the face of the killer.
And to see the face. But where does your fascination come from?
But my fascination I'm always fascinated by the human dimension of character in my film. Actually, this film somehow broke. I didn't make many films. This is my third film, and I'm 45 years old, so I'm like a bit slow. But my first film took 5 years to do it. My second film took another 5-6 years to do it. And this film, I made it in 2 days, basically, and I was very fast.
You shot it in 2 days?
Well, we shot it literally like in the first 2 days, with him in the motel, and then I went back 5 months later to clarify something else, and I shoot for another day in the same room where he does the reenactment and things like that. So basically it was 3 days of shooting. And then I spent 3 months in Juarez shooting, but I didn't use, I used very little images, only the House of Death, that are the addresses that he gave us. Of, where.
But to come back to the origins of your fascination.
Fascination for me, as I said, like it always, for me, when I start a movie, I never know where it brings me. For me, it's like more a way of life. And I start a film and I keep going. And for the major work that I do is like encountering people and character and get it. So in this time, for the first time, I found in front of me a character larger than life, you know, so somehow broke all my way of working. At that point, there was only one thing I couldn't do, and Chucky told me, don't fuck it up. You have this guy in front of you, it's up to you to film, make a good job.
Yeah.
So suddenly I was in this room with him, and after spending...
How did that go? Suddenly, I mean, Charles...
He chose the room, the guy, and I hated this room. When I saw the location, I said, I don't want to film here. It's terrible. There's nothing worse than a motel room, especially that kind of room that he picked it. And Charles told me, well, if he chooses this room, must be a reason, so just accept it. I said, well, but you know, I need some aesthetic in my room. I was figuring out other things with him to do, like maybe in a car, maybe in a slaughterhouse, maybe in places that I knew some address to bring him somewhere. But he didn't accept it. He said, that's the only place where I feel safe, and there were reasons for him to feel safe in that room.
Yeah.
And so when I spent 3 days waiting for him, basically, once I got the room, I rented the room, I moved there in that room, living there in that room, waiting for him to arrive in the morning.
He didn't turn up day
well,
after
for 3
day?
days, no. I just waited for him, two nights. So the next morning, he came at 6 o'clock in the morning, knocked at the door, and he was ready to go. And of course, in these like 2-3 days, I figured out all kind of way of filming, which disappeared completely the moment I set it up in this chair. And the only thing I knew out of my article that could help me was that he was a graphoman. Like he had this compulsive writing. Chuck says in the article that he keeps writing in small pieces of paper.
And drawing also.
Mostly writing was, and then destroy them, you know.
Because he doesn't want to leave traces.
Yeah. So when I asked him, the only thing I did is I bring in these big pads with me and this Sharpie pad. And I asked him, well, could you write everything while you talk? I said, this would be my only way out of this situation, because I couldn't film his face, I couldn't film the things. It was like,
maybe we should explain that for people here, that he is filmed anonymously with a hood over his head.
Yeah, and he came with a police hood, and I didn't want to film that because it was extremely dark and kind of an image too stereotyped. So I had with me this net that I use for camouflage when I filmed outside or camera car things. I put on my camera to hide the camera. So I thought that would have been a good tool, a good device to have him more loose, and somehow it gave him more like a separation with me while I was filming. And that was a net, so it gave it like a sort of confessional, you know, like in a element.
So normally, you know, in television programs where they film anonymous people, you see a silhouette or you see plastic bag overhead, but now there is a net. But still,
I also wanted to see his flashes once in a while. If in a good screening, and I think this is going to be a good screening. You can see his kind of his skin and his. So
as a directorial intervention, you brought a pen and paper for him to draw.
As tools, some kind of element.
What else did you do to make it something else but a television documentary or a journalistic report?
I think one thing that I did, you know, besides not asking any question, that was another thing I told him. I said, I'm not going to ask you any questions. So you have to go from this point to this point. I know you went it all, from good to bad, or from evil to things. And I want you to go through all this pattern. And when he started, he basically didn't stop for 6 hours.
It's a huge performance.
But in a way, then I also knew about this element of it, so that's why I also transformed the room in a stage somehow, like this. I put the white cloth on the chair, and I took away all the pictures, the things, all the element of the room, and I took away the head of. I kind of changed a bit the room, like became like almost a set, you know,
more
like
abstract.
An abstract. See, at the beginning, it's very clear that it's a motel room, and then after it transformed in something else, and I basically left the place for him to go, and he did it. You know, he went for 6 hours without stopping. While I was shooting, I was shooting upside down, which is again any television thing will probably be fired by CNN. You know, like one take, upside down. Which when I was filming, I was like, this is right or wrong. But then I felt, well, if I feel the same thing that the audience is feeling, then it's right. That is the right choice.
After this whole experience, when you think back of what struck you most about what he told you, what would you say was most important or was most striking and something that the audience could look for?
Well, for me, what was striking about was his incredible capacity of narrative and structuring a narrative element, and also to go from detail that were like a teacher almost, you know, when he's writing, he's almost like a teacher at Sorbonne University. He's giving like a lecture.
A lecture of his craft.
Of his craft, you know, how much he considered this being part of a craft, you know. And yet, in certain moment, I was able to personalize all this. So he keeps going from his personal experience to something that is completely objective and distance from him. That was very, very disturbing also by listening. And when I told him, I try not to judge you, I didn't mean to him morally, because of course I knew he'd kill over 500 people in front of me, so there was no way not judging him. But I said, at least with my camera, I will try to be as objective as possible on that. You know, so for me, that's why I never moved when I was filming, and I thought that was the only. But that was pure instinct, you know. I had just to decide on the spot, and then I did it. I only knew that was the right choice when I premiered in Venice, the festival. So
you know, this guy not only killed 500 people, he also tortured people
horribly.
He did horrible things. Why didn't you go to the police to hand him over?
Because of my job. My job is to film, was to film him and to have him to tell the story, and I want to, and it's not only about his story. This is a story that there is a complicity from states, Mexican states, and U.S. government also, because tons of drug.
Maybe you should explain that.
Well, he was trained also he was trained as a policeman. He was basically put there by the cartel on a police, so there's 80% of people, policemen in Juarez are totally corrupted and work for the cartel, 80%. There was a BBC very strong reportage that was made a few months ago. And so there's an incredible complicity by the states.
So as a young man, he was already recruited by the mafia.
He was recruited by the
put
cartel
into the police
and put
academy.
into police academy. And he came out like one of the top rank from the academy and started working as a policeman. And that's what it is, you know, like at a certain point he explained with details how the police moved in all this operation. And that was very scary for me. Two systems that should be totally separate. They're completely connivent. It's a conniventi.
Yeah.
They're intertwined constantly. And you know, that's the truth I want to show to the world, and I want to say, more than bringing him to a police and say he's in charge. I want the film to make think about how much implication there is on the states and on the Mexican government and on the U.S. government, because tons of drugs that they pass every day the border, tons of drugs. The whole supply of cocaine, it passed through Juarez to United States. So why?
And he was also trained by the FBI to detect drugs.
Well, and then there is always system. You know, how does it pass through corruption, because of corruption on both borders. And the cartel, they control all. And he said that very, very clear in the film.
Yeah.
I know that Charles told me that when the Harper's magazine came out, it was lying on the Obama desk for quite a while. So maybe it's something you have to start thinking about. You know?
Yeah.
And also, of course, the problem that there is there on global economy, the fact that there's like all this industry where workers works there for 1 hour, they're making one day what in the United States they would make in 1 day. Yeah. So that's another problem. When life has no value, when the work has no value, then, you know, life is cheap and people can go very easily into crimes, and they get kids. And
it's not the drugs, but also the kidnapping industry that he was big in.
The kidnapping industry is one. The kidnapping industry is a full range. It goes from the guy selling tacos in the street to the big guy. So nobody's safe there. You know, I saw people being slaughtered and killed because they didn't pay the fee for the taco stands.
Yeah.
People that they make few cents a day. You know, they were just killed because they didn't pay their duty on the
Yeah.
corruption. And the more police there is, the more corruption there is, and the more disaster there is there. So it's an endless situation which tackle itself, and I don't know what will be the way out.
Yeah, and kidnapping is one of the main things to make money, but also to keep pressure.
To keep pressure.
And that's why he selected this motel room, isn't it? Because they often took the kidnapped people.
This was a place that they used to take people there, torture, kidnap things. And there was a reason, because it was, of course, in the other side of, was not in Mexico, as you can, he says that, because it's very clear. And in that room, he had the capacity to move very freely, because that room had somehow a geographical space that was safe. You know, you could very easily go out from the door and escape, and was isolated because they didn't have any other room on the sides. So it was a safe location for him.
So were you relieved when everything was over? You could breathe some fresh air?
Yeah, I guess. But it's a film that changed you. You know, once you work in that, it says, at that moment, this film definitely changed me a lot, you know.
In what respect?
Well, in respect that you start seeing things in a different way.
Mm-hmm.
Once you know that there's no more, evilness is so affordable, you know.
Yeah.
And what is amazing about him is that he's one of the most bright persons. Not an animal, he's not a thing, he's not crazy, he's not things, he's absolutely perfect, fine and very, very bright man.
But still you keep your distance from him, huh? He's dangerous too. I get a signal that we'll have to end our conversation already. It's much too soon in my view, but anyway. Let me read a few
Do
lines.
we have a Q&A after the film? Or?
Yeah,
okay.
so people can talk with you. He stands, puts a chokehold on me. He can snap my neck like a twig. Then he sits down. I ask him how much he would charge to kill me. He gives me a cool appraisal and says, at the most 5,000, probably less. You are powerless and you have no connections to power. No one would come after me if I killed you. Now,
that was Charles Bode.
Please, stay alive for your next project. But before we
My
talk...
life would be even cheaper than Charles. So.
Okay. And enjoy the film, or surrender to the film, I would say. Bye-bye.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.